Cool. All right. So I see the chat's filled up. Thanks for everyone who hopped on to just take yourself off mute and introduce yourself that way. That was great as well. Let me see here. Share screen.
Well, while you're doing that, hi all. I'm Jerry Runte. I am also in York. I represent part of York, Algonquin, and Wells, the eastern side of Wells. And I'm interested in getting the lay of the land on where things are headed in the state.
Great, thank you. Can you all see the Zoom? Or sorry, not the Zoom, but the presentation? Everyone's good? Okay, cool. Can you see my notes as well, or is that just for me? I'll take no as a yeah. Okay.
No,
or silence as a no.
We can just see the, yep, we can just see your slideshow.
Great. Thanks, Elaine. Okay, great. So yeah, welcome into our Broadband 101 session. When I was trying to figure out, I guess, what to start the slideshow with in terms of imagery, I landed on Skowhegan. Skowhegan was just awarded with an MCA grant to build out a project there. You know, obviously, if you're familiar with the history of Skowhegan, Old Milltown, that is kind of undergoing revitalization right now. And I think that's kind of gets to the heart of the broadband thing in the state, amongst other kind of things that we think about when it comes to broadband. But yeah, it's a key contributor in, I think, the future of the state. So I just wanted to point that out in the beginning. Skowhegan, beautiful place. Also, summer in Skowhegan is fantastic. If no one's ever been, I highly recommend making your way up there. But anyways, okay, so let's hop into it. So the other quote, or the other thing that we wanted to start the slideshow with, was a quote. This is a quote kind of from Andrew Butcher, who was Maine Broadband Coalition's executive director in a way for when the coalition was just starting up, and he was at GPCOG. He has since moved on to the Maine Connectivity Authority, where he's kind of the leader over there. But together we can get there from here. I think just really, again, strikes to the heart of what we're trying to do here with broadband in the state. Down there at the bottom of the presentation, we have NBC highlighted in yellow as an acronym. That's going to be a resurfacing motif throughout the slideshow. In the broadband space, a lot of acronyms are used, and sometimes it can get a little confusing. At least it was for me when I was first learning about all of this. But MBC is what we commonly refer to as the Maine Broadband Coalition, just in shorthand, because it can be kind of a mouthful sometimes. Okay, so what are we going to do today in our Broadband 101? So the idea behind this is to cover the who, the where, the what, and the why of broadband in the state, so that we can figure out the when and the how. Ideally, the slideshow is going to bring you through who are the major players in the scene in terms of state agencies, nonprofits, what are our business partners look like in the kind of broadband expansion and digital equity efforts look like, and how do community members factor into all of that. The where of it, which is all down to basically mapping, you know, what part of the state you're in. You know, we've seen the kind of big divide between rural and more urban places in the state in terms of historically people's ability to access high-speed, affordable, reliable broadband. And we'll touch on mapping in a little bit. That's kind of a huge, it's frankly a huge topic that we wouldn't have enough time to cover in 3 of these, but we'll touch on it a bit. Hopefully lay out a bit of what the mapping stuff looks like, both within the state and then federally. We're going to talk about the what. So we're going to talk about the different technologies that get used, or that are, you know, the different kind of infrastructure that can be in place to supply broadband service or non-supply broadband, as we'll get into a little bit later. And touch on some of the terminology that's commonly used in kind of talking about projects, talking about how to get infrastructure in place, digital equity, those types of things. And we'll talk about the why. So, you know, I think everyone comes to this call having had different experiences with different kind of levels of availability in terms of broadband access. Everyone has their own experience in terms of, let's say you're an older Mainer who wants to age in place. Let's say you're a student, or you're, you know, the parents of a student who wants to go to school remotely, but maybe can't. Those types of stories are kind of the building blocks for the rest of what we're doing here, just because they're so important in kind of giving life to the community efforts that really fuel these broadband expansion efforts. And so ideally, through exploring those 4 different kind of categories, we'll have some time at the end to talk about the when and the how, which are the burning questions that I think everybody is facing right now. Obviously, there's a ton of money that's coming into the state from the federal government by way of NTIA and infrastructure bills that were passed and all of that great stuff. The unfortunate news is that though that there's a ton of money coming in, it's still not going to be enough to get everybody up to speed in every corner of the state. And so the when and the how are really, really important parts of this conversation, but we can't quite get there until we figure out the first who, what, when, who, what, where, and why. So I hope that kind of lays out a roadmap for the rest of this presentation. So cracking into it first, let's talk about the state players. Let's talk about the Maine Connectivity Authority. They're the kind of big player in the state right now in terms of they act as the conduit from federal government and from state government funding for projects. They're the ones who are responsible for basically getting it into the hands of our ISP partners, of regional broadband partners, who I'll touch on in a bit, of communities, and ultimately helping to basically fund some of the community efforts that are going on in the state, and you know, supplement the good work that's done by community members and ISPs already, in order to make these projects go from just you know, a plan to reality. I will touch on it a little bit later in the presentation, but in essence, Maine has had a really hard time with having communities fully connected to broadband service because frankly, in most rural parts of the state, the kind of market case for building out high-speed, affordable, reliable broadband doesn't really make sense from a business angle. And so the state players are really important. The Maine Connectivity Authority, which is the latest iteration of a state player, Connect Maine, came before them. They've been really important in helping out communities to be able to make a case for an ISP to come and work with them, or to make their projects viable. So 1 second, I did want to drop in their website in case nobody's been there before. They do a great job with kind of supplying resources, and they have just an awesome mapping department, and they are really great about updating their website with relevant information and news and all of that. So this is a really good place to be, really good place to start if you're curious a little bit more about what the Maine Connectivity Authority has going on with it. Okay, cool.
Oh.
Sorry,
It's for
I'm
people.
going
who don't
backwards
have
right now, aren't I?
this
Oh,
underlying
okay.
clear
Okay.
sort of
Uh-huh.
risk. Just a little less for you to worry about.
Okay.
I think someone's
Oh,
off
this
mute
is-
right now.
Oh, something you want to hear?
Oh,
No worries. Okay, so this is touching a little bit on the grant programs that they run. They have basically put together a slew of different, or rather kind of a series of different grant programs that speak to different audiences as a way of getting money out the door from on their behalf to the communities and the ISPs that need it. When I say ISP as well, I'm referring to internet service providers. So these are the spectrums, the charter spectrums, the consolidated communications of the world. These are the people that basically pipe in the internet into your house, and you know, are in part building some of the infrastructure. But these all-in programs, Connect the Ready, Get Ready, enabling middle mile partnerships, and reach me line extensions, all kind of represents these different areas that the state has identified as places where it can help and basically supplement efforts that are being done on a bunch of different fronts, so that, basically when it comes time to for a community to get served with high-speed internet, it's like, are we sending people to build a project completely over what's already there, or are we sending money to the ISP that's already there, who needs to extend its lines to the parts of the community that they haven't served yet? And so this is all part of the considerations that the MCA is doing. You can see here a little bit of the breakdown. Obviously, the numbers here are kind of subject to change because this is all stuff that happened before, or this is the kind of funds that were available to the MCA to play around with before BEAD funding shows up. But you can see more about MCA's all-in programs at the link that I'm sending you right now. There's a really good FAQ section in there. And so, these grants are meant to help projects at different stages along the path to being built out, kind of starting with get ready, and then going to connect the ready, and basically helping usher in money into towns that maybe need help planning, getting kind of the resources to start talking about a project or actually building out a project. So I would encourage anybody who's curious about what the grant funding scene looks like to check out the link that I sent. Okay, so let's talk about the internet service providers. So ISPs, I've been saying ISP. So let's talk about internet service providers. There are a number of different internet service providers that operate within our state. Within kind of, you can make a bunch of different distinctions as to what these providers are doing in terms of technologies that they're using, but also whether they're like in-state. We have a set of kind of local providers who operate on a hyper-local basis in different parts of the state. And then we have kind of national providers, the charters of the world, the consolidated communications of the world, who are operating on a more national scale. We've done our best to kind of break down what each company is kind of the types of technologies that each company uses. So when we talk about charter spectrum, we're talking about a cable network, and the way that cable, we define cable as being basically coaxial cable, which is, just a type of technology that's used by them. It's cheaper to lay out. It has some issues, but again, we can get to that a little bit later in the slideshow. So in terms of wired networks, we have cable networks, we have telecom networks, the telecommunications companies that basically came in a long time ago and laid copper cable into basically every corner of the state. It's a pretty ubiquitous network, but it has issues in terms of how well it can basically carry data, especially over distance. So telecoms, we have like Consolidated Communications, TDS, anyways, fiber, we get into fiber providers. Fidium is kind of the latest, biggest fiber provider that's come into the state. It's actually a part of Consolidated Communications. So Consolidated kind of understood that they had to rebrand a little bit, and they came up with Fidium. If you live in, a Portland or kind of a bigger municipality in the state, you'll see Fidium trucks on the grounds, basically going over their footprint. By their footprint, I mean Consolidated's past footprint, and basically strapping fiber onto the lines that they already have. Axiom and Pioneer Broadband are both Maine-based ISPs. Pioneer mainly kind of operates out of the Holton area, so they're up in Aroostook County. Axiom does stuff down east. They're based out of Machias, but they kind of have projects going in different corners of the state. And then we turn our attention to wireless networks. Many people in the state use cellular and think, that they're basically that, the cellular providers in the state are kind of varying levels of proficient depending on where you are in the state and what type of topography that you're living with. A lot of people, live in places where they don't have access to wired networks and they have to rely on cellular. And so these are like the Verizons of the world, and the AT&Ts, like all of that. And then we get into satellite, and when we get into satellite, we talk about Starlink, we talk about HughesNet. HughesNet is like a real old internet service provider. They've been doing it for a really long time. Starlink's obviously a little bit newer. They have a little bit different technology. But yeah, I wanted to maybe pause here for a second and just see if we have any questions so far, if I'm moving too fast. If not, give me a thumbs up, either kind of with the emoji or just let me know. Okay, I see a thumbs up. Thanks, Solomon. Great. So I also did want to ask too, if you guys know who your ISPs are, who your incumbent ISPs are in particular in your area. A lot of Maine is covered by either charter or consolidated, but there are pockets of, different internet service providers, TDS. I want to take a minute and open it up for people to throw in the chat if they know who their incumbent ISPs are. Yeah. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of Spectrum, seeing some consolidated. Starlink, okay. Hey, Fidium's coming tomorrow. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I am currently on a Spectrum network. I'm in Portland, but we have Fidium that's in town right now, and yeah, kind of a number of other services. First Light, gotcha. So it's really good to know who's in your neighborhood in terms of incumbent ISPs, just in terms of one of the first things that we recommend that communities do when they're looking to address their connectivity issues is we ask them to kind of do an inventory in terms of who's already there, who can you talk to maybe get this issue resolved the quickest, like what types of problems have we seen with certain types of networks. What can you expect in terms of like how you should be thinking about going for grant funding and all of that. It all is somewhat dependent on what's already in your town. So it's really good for people to know that if you don't have access to that information, or you haven't or you just maybe don't know, or it doesn't exist, I would say just reach out to me or my email. I just dropped my email in the chat. Reach out to me and we can talk about how you can find that information. There are a couple good resources out there that help people find that. But yes, just I can't find them right now, or I would. But yeah, just reach out to me after this, and I can help you find those things or find that information. Okay, cool. So we're going to crack into the technical assistance side of things. So we've talked about state players, Maine Connectivity Authority, MCA, NBC. I think we can also count among those in terms of having like a statewide focus. We've talked about the internet service providers, so kind of like the business end of things, the people who are kind of going to be helping to create these networks and basically pipe in the internet from wherever they're piping it in from. And so now we can talk about the technical assistance piece of the ecosystem here. And we kind of broke it into two different categories. So we have your regional supports. I'll touch on it in maybe the slide after this. Yeah, the slide after this, but the MCA, the Maine Broadband Coalition, and the National Digital Equity Center, which is also run out of Maine, have teamed up in partnership to basically help support this program called the Regional and Tribal Broadband Partners Program. And the idea behind that program is to fund and give resources to 13 different regional and tribal organizations. So these are the Island Institutes of the World, the Sunrise County Economic Councils of the world, GBCOG, AVCOG, Four Directions. There are 13 of them, and I have a complete list on the next slide. But the idea behind that is that a lot of communities are going to need help very soon, if not right now. And it is a difficult thing to try to basically work with communities one-on-one and help give them the resources that they need to be successful in kind of cultivating a broadband project if everyone comes to the state level. So if everyone comes to MCA, if everyone comes to Maine Broadband Coalition, we have a lot harder time with helping people kind of figure out the details of where they need to go and where they need to get to. So in turn, we have these 13 wonderful, highly capable regional partners and regional supports where communities can turn to. On the next slide, I have a map and a list of the regional supports that people can dig into. I would say if you have like questions kind of immediately, they're really good people to turn to. I'm not sure how everybody is using their funding from the Regional and Tribal Broadband Partners Program, but we've seen that in a bunch of these different regional agencies and kind of these place-based organizations, they've actually hired folks to kind of dedicate to helping communities with broadband stuff. So I'll get to that in the next slide, but that was kind of the first big section. The second big kind of group that we wanted to talk about was consultants that are out there. Mission Broadband's Casco Bay Advisors are a couple amongst a few more, and those are really good supports if your community has a little bit of money to throw at doing some sort of inventory or helping to pull together like a broadband plan for the town or something like that. Casco Bay Advisors, Mission Broadband are both good places to go to, and they'll help you out, but they're consultants. So, if the town has like a budget for it, or if the broadband committee finds some money, or, I'm not sure MCA's funding in the past, but Connect Maine has funded in the past to help basically defray costs for the town to, you can use like a Connect Maine grant to help pay for one of these. So anyways, again, if you want more information on that, feel free to email me. I can help. There's some like subtleties in there that I could talk about, but I just want to keep it moving a little bit because this is really the place that we want to send people, these regional and tribal broadband partners. So I listed a few of them when I was talking about examples of our partners, but here's a really nice map to see kind of where you fit in, where your community fits in. We have varying levels of, I think, experience at some of these different organizations. Nonetheless, everyone is equipped to help out and ready to basically be a support for every community that's in the region. Anyone wants to take a screenshot of that. I also have a link to the MCA website that has more information on the regional and tribal broadband partners. RTBP is also an acronym that we use. I didn't put it in the slideshow, but if you see RTBP, that's kind of what that is referring to. And then I wanted to pull out this little funky ecosystem. It's kind of like back of the napkin type stuff that we pulled together last summer. So it's a little bit out of date, but ideally this will help give you a good idea about how these things are all working together. And so the way we laid it out, again, this is last summer, some things have changed, but NBC is kind of like the grassroots organization that's really helping with advocacy, education, community capacity building, those types of things, the types of kind of community efforts or helping to support community efforts. Whereas the Maine Connectivity Authority is kind of the bank in the state in terms of helping communities out with grant funding and all that. They are the authority when it comes to, what do I need to do to get, to secure a grant? What do I need in terms of, like inventories or those types of things? They have a fantastic team of people who are just super helpful to me, honestly, but super helpful to everybody when it comes to answering these questions. But, in turn, the Maine Connectivity Authority and the Maine Broadband Coalition both support the basic functions of planning and equity and funding in the state with a slew of other partners and kind of other parts of the ecosystem. So again, this is a tiny bit out of date, but I think it strikes the kind of the heart of what the ecosystem looks like. And I'll try to find a place for that on the Maine Broadband Coalition website as well, if someone wants to revisit it after a little update. And the last part of the who, we wanted to talk about community members. So this is you folks. This is the people who, aren't involved at the business end, aren't involved at the state agency, aren't involved with the kind of regional agencies or, there's no kind of skin in the game in terms of that, but these are the people that are really affected by the lack of broadband connectivity in their, corners of the state. And so one of the cool things that I've kind of witnessed during my time with the Maine Broadband Coalition, which has been, about a year and a half, and speaking with different communities who are doing, who are kind of striking out on trying to get these projects together, is that the people who have emerged in terms of leaders in the town are all, they all look a little bit different. They all have a little bit different story. They're all people who come to this issue from different kind of points of view and have, they have an authority in their town based on the fact that they were, a teacher for 30 years. It's like, great, you're somebody who can really speak to an issue and people will listen. But we wanted to really kind of talk about the types of people that are good people to help build out a broadband committee or a group in town if you want to get a community effort together. And so we kind of broke it down to 6 groups. Municipal officials, really good to have some select board member or town official or somebody who's maybe been through an election. It's really good to have them kind of supporting your broadband committee's work or your broadband group's work. Just in terms of, you might, it might come time for a town vote, or, it might be a useful thing for the broadband community to be recognized officially by the town. It's really nice to have a municipal official or a couple who see things the way that you do in terms of your community's need. Telecommuters, great. Someone who depends on broadband for work. There are a bunch of stories about that in Maine. A lot of people work remotely, or even for example, I was speaking with a woman the other day who, due to one of the snowstorms that happened in the last week or two, just couldn't make it into work, had a big deadline, couldn't really make the deadline because she didn't have broadband at her home. So it's like, those are the types of stories that are really good to kind of find the types of people in your community who are really good to talk to and get their kind of experiences on board. Educators, as I mentioned, we're talking librarians, we're talking school nurses, we're talking English teachers, we're talking people who deal with students who might not have internet service at their home. They can't go home and do homework, those types of things. Local business people are also a really good group to talk to. We know that small businesses in Maine are really important, and if there isn't kind of reliable and sufficient broadband connection for somebody to run like point of service stuff, that's hard. If someone's not able to work remotely or hire remotely, that's really hard. So local business people are really important to talk to. Someone who interacts with a wide range of community. So just like the guy in town who sits at the coffee shop and everyone knows him and everyone likes him, and he he is just one of those figures in the community that people listen when he has something to say or she has something to say. So those are really important people as well. And then just other key individuals. So that's a very, very, very broad kind of category, but I think everybody who is familiar with their community knows that there are people who like kind of hold the whole thing together. And so again, like finding this coalition of folks within your community can really help to basically catalyze a project and move it from something that people want to something that's like attainable. Okay, we are through the who. Does anyone have questions, comments, concerns thus far? No? Okay. All right, so let's get to the what. I'll try to be a little quicker. So first thing that I think is really important to talk about in the what is the technology. We've laid out 5 different types of technology that kind of move from, well, not quite oldest, but the, I guess, least desirable in terms of like relative to what broadband is. If broadband is a definition, then we can kind of measure the types of technologies off of that definition. And so DSL, copper lines have are not great for transmitting data back and forth, become worse over distance. This is the stuff that pretty much everyone has access to in the state, just because it's like based off of the telephone line, and you know the state got pretty well covered by telephone lines. But since then, it's just not an ideal service, and it certainly doesn't meet the kind of definition of what broadband is. And we get into cable. There's kind of a wide range of what cable can provide, but again, this is coaxial copper TV. You'll find cable is, you know, it transmits your television service, it does your phone line, it does internet. Again, it's pretty ubiquitous, but there are troubles with it if it comes to you know, like a peak hour in your neighborhood. Everybody's hopping online to watch Netflix, do something like that. You run into problems with speed. You know, over a distance, it can kind of degrade in terms of your ability to transmit data if you're far from like a central office. You know, you can run into different problems with cable. Again, this is also a pretty ubiquitous technology that's kind of all around the state, but it has varying levels of reliability, and you know, it's not necessarily the best solution in terms of from a purely technological standpoint. Fixed wireless is basically the way that I think about fixed wireless, at least, and I'm sure if there are fixed wireless people out there or on the call, they'll be like, that's totally, you know, it's a very simplified view of it, but it's essentially like a big Wi-Fi router from on top of a cell phone or from on top of a tower that beams connectivity out to the surrounding areas, which is a pretty clever idea, I think, for places that are super rural, super remote. It runs into problems in terms of if you have tree coverage in, you know, on your property, if you're in a kind of complicated topographical part of the state, or you know, if there's a big storm or something like that. Like there are ways in which when the kind of data is transmitting over the airwaves, it can get interfered with and thus lead to some reliability problems. There are kind of technological innovations going on in that sphere right now that I think are seeking to address some of those issues, but for right now, it's like we kind of have it in this variable range of reliability and speed, where yeah, it's pretty good. If you know, if it's the thing you need, it's yeah. Then we get into satellite. So there are 2 different types of satellite services. There's kind of the high satellite stuff, which is the HughesNets of the world. And then you get into lower orbit satellites, which are the Starlinks of the world. Yeah, they're, you know, again, really good services for places that are rural, for places that don't really have any there's no like immediate relief for broadband expansion or wired connections in their part of the state, but it runs into kind of the same problems with signal interference, and if there's a lot of people who are using it at the same time, speeds can slow down and dip and do all those funky things. So it's a bit of an unproven technology right now, although it is promising for certain parts of the state. And then we get into fiber optic cable, and so this is though like wired, it's actually glass, and so it's like this hyper thin, skinny glass strands that's able to transmit just way more data at like a way faster rate, and over a way faster distance. When it comes to like basically how people think about these different technologies, it's often considered that fiber optic as a technology is the most future-proof, because the glass strand itself isn't something that's going to have to be replaced unless like a tree falls on it or something like that. But they haven't yet figured out the upper bounds of basically what the glass strand can handle in terms of data being transmitted over it. And so while it's like we have on here average speeds of 1,000 over 1,000, theoretically you can get basically boundless speeds after that, as long as you're upgrading the basically the equipment that helps to transmit the fiber, which I won't get into too much because I'm not super technically proficient in terms of that, but yeah, basically the way that it's what we understand about it is that it is the most future-proof. As an investment, you don't necessarily have to go in and replace all the fiber in the same way that you have to replace maybe cable if you're if you're trying to upgrade your lines or do that type of thing. So yeah, that's a little bit on the technological side of things. Do people have any questions about that?
I actually have a quick question just in terms of average speeds. What is kind of the standard that we're looking for in the state? And
yeah, so let me here. Okay, so that kind of gets into served, the idea of served, and like what broadband actually is. So broadband is like it's a definition, and so we have different definitions for what broadband is, or what broadband was, now is, or what the federal government deems as broadband and what we deem as broadband as a state. And so what we deem as served in the state is 100 over 100. Underserved being less than 100 over 100, and least served as being less than 25 over 3. So underserved being anywhere in that kind of range of like 100 over 20 or something like that, because the way we have to think about these numbers, these megabits per second, is that you have this download speed, which is, and this is what Peggy Schaefer says, which is I think a really good way of thinking about it, but the download speed is how the world talks to Maine. That's how we get our information in. That's how we stream our Netflix. That's how we do our that's how we do one way of our Zoom call. But then the upload speed is how Maine talks to the world, and that's how you talk to the world. And so that's like, yeah, that's the other end of the Zoom call. That's when like you want to be, you want to make sure that you're being heard clearly, and those types of things. So you'll see a lot of kind of asymmetrical service, symmetrical service, 100 over 100. That's what the state considers serves. The FCC, so the federal government, has a slightly different definition of it, being 25 over 3, which means that there is some discrepancy. And when we talk about these definitions and those types of things, it has to do with basically what level the state or the kind of body that has that definition is willing to subsidize like a project at. It's willing to give money at. So the state wants to see projects that have people get served, which means they're willing, like they're more willing to spend money in places where basically there's fiber that's going to be rolled out. That's essentially what that means. So
Awesome. That's
see
a
it.
really helpful definition. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, William, I see your hands up.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you.
Oh, good. So a lot of rural areas have a mixture of cable and DSL.
Mhm.
And in the last round of grant reviews by the MCA, some of the areas that had a substantial cable presence were put into the third preference group. Because, you know, people who have cable broadband access today have something that's not bad. You know, whether it's going to be good in 5 or 10 years, we don't know.
Right.
How do you think the state is going about getting service to the people in those towns, in the areas that the cable companies never invested in? Because right now the criteria and the methodology for evaluating proposals puts those towns, say, with more than half of cable coverage into preference group 3 and did not approve any of their applications.
Yeah, Miles, I don't know if you wanted to speak to that.
William, I'm Miles. I'm the director of NBC. I'm joining late because I was at another meeting. I think you pose a great question. The criteria that the MCA laid out put a heavy preference on serving those folks who are in this least served definition under 25/3. And the data that they are using to determine what category your project fits into, in some cases, the data, the maps that they're using, it's proprietary, it's owned by the businesses who provide whatever internet service is available in those places, and MCA is not allowed to share that. And I think that that's unfortunate, because it would help us understand a little bit better how to design projects that can be competitive by their metrics. I do think that it was probably inevitable, not a surprise, that the first round of funding would go to those places where almost everybody is on DSL, if even that. And I'm hopeful that future rounds, and as we have this big infusion of funding from the BEAD program, that we're going to be able to, or that MCA is going to fund projects that are currently in this underserved category. But we haven't gotten there yet. I'm hopeful that we do really soon, because I agree, the coalition believes that folks who are currently on internet that, you know, is good enough to stream television, but is not good enough to actually participate in the economy, actually work with documents in the cloud, video management, have multiple people on video at the same time in their home. That technology is needed, and it's needed more and more every year. So it's essential that people who want this 100/100 standard can get it. And that's what we're pushing for our part as the coalition. Did I answer the question?
Follow up on that, though.
Yeah.
There's a couple of, our town has 1/3 of the town has DSL only.
Mm-hmm.
And we did not make an application to the last round for various reasons. But I'm pretty sure, based on what happened with Wayne, had we applied, we would not have been approved as the way we had constructed our application. And so we know where the cable is, and we know where the DSL is, because we paid for that information twice. And the problem is, in order to connect the DSL locations in our town with fiber, one would have to string the fiber through cabled areas. And the way the evaluation of the grants works, there would be no subsidies available, at least if you're in preference group 3, for those miles of fiber. And so that perpetuates the market failure that is reflected in the way cable is distributed. And I'm wondering if your group is working on any policies to help correct that, either relating to regulation of cable TV companies, particularly those who are applying for grants in other parts of the state, or whether you're thinking of ways of rejiggering the formula for allocating grants to provide some funding for areas that you have to overbuild cable.
Well, I'll answer you quickly, William, because I want to make sure that we have enough time to cover the Broadband 101 topic for the people on the call. But the answer to your question generally is yes, we are interested in that feedback. I have passed along some of this feedback that I've heard from other communities to MCA, and they've asked for us to kind of put it together for them as well. And they have said that the process will change, and it's the first time they're giving grants away. So we wouldn't be surprised to see some changes the next time around. But I hear what you're saying. I get what you mean. I want to make sure that we get back to the topic at hand, but I'm going to leave my email address and phone number in the chat thread. I'd be happy to talk to you more about your specific situation in town. But generally speaking, these are things that we want to make sure get corrected, and that everybody in the state who wants this 100/100 standard can get it, and that companies that are incumbents that are providing less than that standard, that we don't just make way for them because they're already there. Okay.
Thanks very much. I'll send you an email.
Great. Go ahead, Jeff. Thank you, Mike.
Okay. All right, great. Yeah, thank you for that question. Audience participation rocks. Okay, cool. So yeah, I spoke to it a little bit, but fiber optics, just to get back to it. Yeah, it's future-proof. It's the technology that I think the industry has looked around and seen and said, like, okay, there's no kind of technical limitations here in terms of the glass strand itself. Whereas with copper and coaxial cable, we're bumping up against some limitations in terms of what the actual material can handle in terms of data transmission. That said, there's some kind of stuff going on with cable, and they're working on innovations that I think will, though unproven at this point, they're saying will lead to higher speeds and better reliability. So keep an eye out for that. But the essence behind what makes, I think, fiber optics so appealing to people is the fact that it's an infrastructure that, though maybe more expensive to lay, up front in terms of when you're factoring in your costs for, what types of infrastructure you want to have in your community. It's got a little bit more longevity in terms of it doesn't need to be replaced maybe as frequently outside of abnormal events occurring, aka like a tree falling down or a big ice storm or whatever. Where the network can be upgraded is basically in the technologies kind of that get your house linked in, or get the fiber from the line to maybe to the back. Not too sure, but anyways, I wanted to point out two more acronyms: fiber to the home and fiber to the premise. Those are both acronyms that are used when we're talking about fiber in terms of, are we building, are we building fiber from the backbone to, the backhaul to the last mile, and then from the last mile, are we getting it from literally the pole to your home, or is the fiber just living up on a line that goes by your street, and you have a copper cable that comes off, or a coaxial cable that comes off and connects to it? Because at this point, much of the kind of fundamental infrastructure of the internet, in terms of like the big pipe that comes into the state, that's a big fiber line. But that doesn't mean that everything coming off of it's a fiber line, as we know. Okay, yeah, and then I want to talk a little bit more about the Starlinks and the kind of wireless connectors of the world. These technologies that I think a lot of people are very excited about in terms of their potential for connecting a lot of people in a way that's relatively low impact. It doesn't involve wires. It doesn't involve hard connections or anything like that. But they're this quote from Susan Crawford, I think, is pretty apt. When Susan Crawford's like an industry leader, I think, in the broadband fields, and she says, "The future is wireless. Who cares about fiber?" Is like saying that we can have planes without airports. And so the truth of the matter is that, again, like even the towers that fixed wireless beam from, those are all hooked up to fiber lines to eventually beam out. So it's like if this is the fundamental kind of backbone of what we're doing here in terms of connecting, the state, then why should we limit that to having fiber that comes directly into our homes? And so I've been speaking a little bit about it, and I'm kind of going backwards here, but I wanted to touch on really quickly, like what I've been talking about in terms of backbone, middle mile / backhaul, and last mile. But backbone is essentially the phrase that's used when we're talking about the 3-ring binder. I don't know if people are familiar with the 3-ring binder, built maybe a couple decades ago, but it was kind of the initial push for bringing high-speed internet into the state. Since then, it's the state built it and I think owned part of it, and then it's been sold off. That said, the Maine Connectivity Authority is looking to kind of build out another type of backbone. And so the idea behind building out this backbone infrastructure is that it pipes in like this really high-speed internet into these different communities, and then ISPs or utilities can basically tap into this network and build out their networks off of it. And so that would be what kind of middle mile is referring to in this instance. So you have the backbone that pipes in super high speed internet from these big fiber lines, and then middle mile is the kind of infrastructure that goes by on all of the major roads that are in your community. It's the stuff that basically how can I it's like the intermediary network between the backbone and what connects to your house, and so that's what we refer to as middle mile. There's like we're working with or speaking frequently with a guy out in Monhegan, and the undersea cable that goes from the mainland to Monhegan is what we'd consider backhaul or middle mile infrastructure, whereas on the island itself, we're talking more about last mile and universal access. So does anyone have questions about that? Okay. And so
Joe?
this kind of yeah.
It's Elaine, and there's a question in the chat that says, can you clarify the difference between to the premise versus to the home?
To the premise versus to the home. The way that I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, if somebody knows a little bit more about this, but fiber to the home basically is being fiber to the pole outside of your house, and then fiber to the premise is the actual connection from that pole into your home. Cool. Okay. Sorry, I missed that question. And so at this point, I think it's worth considering, some fundamental questions. Like if you're looking to get a project together in your town, there are kind of 3 questions that are really good to consider early on in your project, because it'll help orient the rest of what you're trying to do. But the idea is like, do you want universal service? So do you want to make sure everybody in your town is connected, no matter how far out they are, no matter, how expensive it may be? Is this something that you prioritize as a community? Second question being, do you want fiber to the home? in your project? Is this something that you're like also prioritizing? Is that a technology that you even want to use? Would you be more happy with, some sort of, patchwork of different technologies or whatnot? So that's another good question to consider. And then the third question is, do you want to own the infrastructure? And there are a series of different types of models in the state thus far, and certainly in the country, where communities own kind of different levels of the infrastructure that they're basically organizing around trying to get. And so I would point you to our YouTube page. The Maine Broadband Summit this year had a really good session on public-private partnerships and what those look like in the state. Had a series of different internet service providers who were speaking to kind of the ways that they conduct their business in terms of ownership on behalf of the town, ownership from the ISP's point of view, and how they configure their business arrangements like that, and like angle towards solutions that are beneficial to all parties involved. And so I would point you towards that. If I had it on me right now, I would send it, but maybe afterwards I could, we'll do a little question and answer, and I'll get off this presentation and send it to you. But we already talked about this slide, the definitions of served versus underserved versus least served. Again, broadband is a definition fundamentally at the end of the day. And so that definition has changed over time. It's different in the state versus with the federal government. But it's a good thing to know and understand. This information is also accessible on the MCA's website. And this is something that I think we've been like kind of talking around in a bunch of different ways in terms of like why the problem is so acute in rural places. But basically the issue that we've run into in the state is that for a really long time, there wasn't really assistance to subsidize high-speed quality internet in places that are rural. And so the way that the problem has been dealt with in the state for a really long time is just basically leaving it up to market forces and kind of these economic arguments for that have basically left rural communities behind, because at the end of the day, national-based ISP doesn't necessarily want to spend a bunch of money in a place to upgrade infrastructure or build to every home, or have this like really kind of the types of infrastructure that I think we all here understand that we need in order to conduct our lives. They weren't really interested in deploying it in many rural places because it didn't make a ton of sense for them, just money-wise, bottom line. And so that's kind of left us in this position where rural places have been really left behind, and more kind of urban, more well-populated places are doing slightly better, but still in a spot where we have relatively low population density as a state. It just really hasn't been a place where ISPs have focused their energy in terms of building out. And so when we talk about economic feasibility in the moment that we're in, I think it's really important for people to understand that the equation has been shifted a little bit, where now towns can, and communities and regions, and however you want to configure yourselves as communities, can change the equation in terms of what is feasible for an internet service provider to come in and help you build out a network that provides you with high quality, reliable, affordable internet. And that's by way of this, like the state helping to subsidize some of those projects. That's by way of, I think ISPs, generally speaking, have become more willing to work with communities in order to build out infrastructure. And so that's something that I think we are really tuned to in the state. Something that is worth a deep dive if you're looking to get into some of the specifics around it. The link down here on the slideshow, if you look up Island Institute Waypoints Connect, it'll take you to an article or a magazine rather, that kind of lays it out really well. There's a bunch of information out there that talks a little bit more about kind of the way that just leaving it up to the market has left rural communities behind. Really worth looking into though, if you're interested in this topic, and to help maybe explain a little bit more about why your community is in the place that it's in. And so as kind of a response to all of that, we at the Maine Broadband Coalition, when we, long time ago, started up with trying to get basically community speed tests going. And so this is a really good way for community members to organize within their communities to make sure that the data that exists in like these FCC databases at the state, that this data is correct. It's showing the true conditions of what's on the ground in different communities around the state, rather than relying on maybe what ISPs are saying they have in terms of like a footprint, in terms of serving people, because there is a lot of discrepancy in the data that lives in places where people make decisions about how much grant money a state is going to get, how much grant money a community is going to get, and the conditions on the grounds where they're at. And so we helped to develop a tool that's, I'll drop in the chat right now if you're unfamiliar with it, which is just a speed testing tool. We've seen a lot of communities basically start their effort by disseminating those speed tests within the community, and basically helping to take a better snapshot of what's going on. So through it to the why. As was mentioned at kind of the top of this presentation, there's a ton of reasons for why broadband expansion, digital equity, that these things matter. It's almost like pick your poison, except it's not poison. It's like a really good thing in terms of why, like the impacts that this could have. Broadband's a really, really fascinating issue because it's a cross-cutting issue that has implications in a series of different policy spaces, a series of different kind of justice spaces, equity. It's business. It touches everybody's life in different ways, and so we just kind of want to lay out a couple of them here. In terms of like business benefits, we're talking about reaching customers, creating content, the whole 9 yards. Everyone knows that the good online presence is really important in today's world in terms of conducting your business. And so that's kind of one of the chief reasons why broadband is so needed in the state. We're talking about education, remote learning, anything that has, when it comes to our students, to the young people in the state who have to leave to go, or feel like they have to leave to go get a good education or go get a good job or any of those things. It's, the need for everybody to have, this universal high speed quality internet access is just incredibly important in, creating like this educated, well-educated population. We're talking about telehealth. So one of the things that I think about when it comes to telehealth is one of the volunteers who I worked with, kind of in the Sebago Lakes region, who would commute to Portland, or not commute, but would have to travel to Portland, about an hour and a half each way, 2 times a week, so he could go to his doctors to get a check-in, because he was, he had various ailments. And so you think about the time spent traveling as a maybe older Mainer, any of those kinds of issues that come along with telehealth, and inability to access telehealth and like stay in place and to be to be in the place that you want to be in is really important. Economic opportunity, I think we've laid out in a couple of different ways. And then I think another thing that kind of goes under the radar is just like quality of life stuff. I think quality of life stuff is really important. It's the stuff that, it's the glue that binds it all together. And for as much as we talk about kind of like these hard economic benefits and educational benefits, we're talking about the way that it can, help revitalize a community, like all of these different things. I think you can't underrate the fact that the internet is something that people want to connect to like, yeah, Zoom with your family, be connected to what's going on in, pop culture, like whatever it may be, pick your poison, whether you're like a gamer, it doesn't matter. This is all stuff that like we live in 2023, we live in the 21st century. This is all stuff that we should have access to, regardless of where we're at, regardless of, how far in the woods we are or how far off the coast we are. This is all just important stuff to be able to access. So nice little ecosystem here from the Island Institute. That I think ideally the things that I was just talking about, this helps to underscore them in terms of like just the interconnectedness of the benefits of high-speed broadband in a community, and the way that it can kind of help to reshape a community in a way that's beneficial. Just a nice testimony here from Brian in Bremen, speaking to the qualities of remote work. I'm remote working right now, though I'm sure that Miles and I could probably meet up at a coffee shop, as we've done in an instant. But like it's the stuff that you need to do in like the economy today. These are the opportunities that people I think need in the state in a lot of ways. They should have access to economic opportunity. Yeah. Education, as we've already talked about, this is just a really nice, this is obviously kind of mid-pandemic, and speaking to the importance of being able to, teach kids at home when, let's say another pandemic rolls around or whatever it may be. But like the idea that everybody should have access, students should have access to high-speed internet in their homes. These are really good stories, again, to capture in your community if you're looking to get a project together, or if you're looking to like kind of organize around this effort. It's like you can't forget about the young people in your community who have been impacted by this, who need access to pursue their educational goals, who need to do their homework, who need any of that. It's just a population that's incredibly important. One of the cool things too about this, and we had a whole session on it at the Maine Broadband Summit this year, is again like this idea of a resilient workforce, and the idea that like a seasonal workforce can, it's like you can do things seasonally online. LL Bean is a really great example of it. They have, when the holidays roll around, LL Bean needs help. We have the Maine community colleges basically doing workforce training around folks to literally lay the stuff that the infrastructure, I mean, like the fiber, all of that. There's a shortage of people to do that type of work in the state right now, and so we're talking about a bunch of jobs in that area. We're talking about the ability for somebody to live in Washington County and go to work in Boston every day on the computer, and be able to live in the place that they want to live in, but do the work that they want to do that's fulfilling to them. And the fact that you don't have to be limited by either, by location. This is all really important stuff, and I think everybody here understands how wonderful this place is. It's like one of a kind in a lot of ways, and I think if we're able to like think about broadband in the sense of creating a more vibrant and resilient workforce in a place where anybody can live here and pursue the things that they want to pursue in the working world, we're all better for it. Touched on telehealth as well. This is a kind of an underrated one, but society and the planet. Basically, there's a bunch of studies that have come out where teleworking obviously means that you don't have to commute. Teleworking means that you can spend more time at your coffee shop. It means that let's say, you can get a job in New York City when you're from Oxford County, and live in your community keep your community like, whole, strong, all of it. It's just the society and the planet, I think, benefit greatly from our ability to basically leverage the technology that we have all around us, and to appreciate our natural worlds and kind of think about some of the larger problems that are out there in terms of climate emergency. So this is kind of, what was this? No, this is not the last slide. This is almost the last slide. So we talked a little bit about it earlier in terms of really good questions to ask at the get, in terms of like, do we want ubiquitous service? Do we want full fiber to the house? Do we want owner infrastructure? Another really important data point or series of data points for people to consider when it comes to getting their project together is to like step back and to set your goals, as the slide says. And this is kind of a series of different things that you should consider in terms of like taking inventory of before before you embark on your project. And so that's like really taking stock of like who's in your community. Do we have a comprehensive plan? Like, do we have some sort of thing in the work for this? Are we thinking about this problem already? If we're not thinking about this problem, how should we be thinking about it? How should we be surveying? Like, what are the types of questions that we should be asking to people? Are there specific neighborhoods that we should be spending more time in to get stories out of there? Are we, like, what are the like kind of what are the things that only a community, somebody living in a community could like convey about how important the problem is? And then how do you build a project basically off of that? Because it looks different for every community, which is, I'll touch on in the next slide, but that's just like one of the truths of this broadband thing right now, is that every community looks a little bit different, has a little bit different ideas about why they need their broadbands. Everybody has, a greater or lesser threshold in terms of how they want to think about investing in their community or those types of things. And so taking stock of that, getting an inventory, a good snapshot before you embark on this is really important. And that brings us to the community-driven broadband process wheel, the wheel. I love this wheel. This wheel is so cool because the beauty of it is that you can enter the wheel at almost any point, and there is enough trial and error, I think, that's been worked out from this that has proven out the fact that if you like pay attention to the types of things that you should be considering based off of what the wheel has laid out, you're going to be in a good place in terms of your project being implemented ultimately. And so what I mean by that is that it takes a lot of work by any means, but if you talk to anybody who's been engaged with this, a broadband project, it takes a lot of work. But if you pay attention to the things that the wheel is laying out here, it can help to guide your work, and it can help to bring together a project that is faithful to the way that your community wants to see this infrastructure and digital equity stuff being laid out. If it comes down to a town vote, you can have some assurance that the community is behind you, and you've got like this really fully considered idea of how to address a problem that everybody, I think, on some level knows they need addressed, but this is just a really good way of being sensitive to the problem, how it looks, how it's played out in the community, and how to create a solution that is like resilient and will ultimately be like really effective, I think, in your community. So I love this wheel. Anyways, enough about the wheel. Cool. So that's it for me. What we got? We got 12 minutes left for questions. I did want to plug just a couple things. First, I wanted to plug the please move. I can't get it to move right now. I'll just drop links in the chat after we're done. But We have a newsletter that goes out every week that has, news from Maine and from around the country. We have that. It also includes some commentary. It includes links to things. It's got just everything, ideally, that you need. It'll have some like kind of community testimony too going forward, which I'm really excited about. On top of that, Let's Talk Broadbands happens every Friday from 11 to noon. It is a super informal session that is just basically like an office hours between the Maine Broadband Coalition, the Maine Connectivity Authority, Brooke from NTIA is there sometimes. There are a slew of kind of regulars who come, who are folks who are a little bit deeper into their projects, who have really great insights, but it's open to everybody. If you are curious about anything, if you have a question, if you want to learn more, if you want to just kind of steep yourself in it, in the broadband kind of space a little bit more, Let's Talk Broadband. Come on by. Yeah, and then Maine Connectivity Authority's website, I've already put in the chat a couple times, but I'll send that out again. So that's it for me in terms of slideshow. How are we all feeling right now? I know my brain is, I don't know. I don't talk so good no more, you know? Is there anything I can, yeah, Jan, I see you.
Yeah, I just like to say thank you. It was really informative for me, just joining this process. The town clerk here, I was
Cool.
a teacher here for five years before that, and moved back here and bought a house. So all those things you're talking about make sense for, I live on an island. It's pretty
Gotcha.
isolated, and we have declining community. So anyway, just thank you. I don't want to take a lot of time, but thank you. That was really helpful to me personally. So.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for being here and sharing that and, engaging with this. I think right now it's like we're just trying to on-ramp as many people into this conversation as possible, because it's really an all hands on deck type thing. And again, like, you're on an island. I'm not sure if the Island Institute folks are like a part of your your kind of world, but they're fantastic people to help any community in this conversation. So yeah, shout out to them as well. Okay, let me.
I understand that the BEAD grants that are coming out, and I don't even know what BEAD stands for, but that there will be looking at the lower end of the input and output. And so if you have Spectrum or a consolidated that's giving you more than that lower rate, you may not qualify for the BEAD grant money. Is the state looking into working on that with the feds?
Yeah, Miles. Yeah,
That's a great question. The state has, so the Maine Connectivity Authority has been more aggressive than they're required to be by federal law, by the Federal Communication Commission's definitions of broadband. They've been more aggressive in favoring higher quality technology like fiber optic over things like cable and wireless than they're required to be by law. We in the coalition hope that that continues, and that continues as they get more funding from the federal government. It is also the case, I am sure, that certain interests would like for their technology and for their companies to be considered good applicants for the federal money. And so they're lobbying in that direction as well. Even members of Congress on their behalf are speaking up to limit, or not limit, to widen the types of technology and speeds that are eligible for federal funding to include cable companies with the technology they're using in Maine right now. The coalition believes that we need to do better than that, and that we need symmetrical service. We need 100 over 100. So that's where we're going to be. And so far, that's where MCA has been as well. So we hope it stays that way.
It's kind of hard to say, put away your Kodak camera and your film, that, you know, you're going to be using your digital camera from now on and in the future, because people still like their film and their Kodak camera. I feel that's where cable is right now.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Ken Burke. I'm on the Eastport Fiber Connectivity Committee, and I just wanted to add to your comment there. Is there anything we can do at community level to bolster your argument for the fact that cable no longer works? It's not a sufficient answer, and fiber really is the future.
I mean, Ken, that's a great question. I'll say two things. One is that we need stories from actual people whose business purposes, work from home, studying, whatever it is that they're trying to do, isn't possible with the connections they have now. That helps us teach the whole state that the status quo isn't good enough. So that's one thing that you can do. And if you have people from your community that are trying to set up a business in Eastport and it can't work with the service they have available now, or a family that's trying to study from home, or older folks whose kids are coming to stay with them over the summer, but they can't telework because the service they have isn't good enough. Those types of stories help us create the larger narrative. And then specifically, there will be times where we're going to need your help, your voices, to add to this, because while we haven't seen it yet, I would anticipate that there will be attempts to direct public investment to legacy technology. It hasn't happened yet, but I think that they'll try, because it's been the case in other states. Maine is doing a lot better than many other states, and that's to the credit of Maine Broadband Coalition in the past and to MCA now. That, you know, in a lot of states, they're just kind of writing a check to the cable company and say, extend service to more people and recreate your monopolies for more customers for years and years to come. We're not doing that here, and we want it to stay that way.
When you say that, are you talking about action to help bolster the argument that would prevent or slow action at a government level, a state government level, to redirect those funds, or at a more community-oriented level? Because there already have been instances where various players have added to the fog of the conversation and provided, if not outright untruths, significant information that have derailed a couple of efforts in communities across the state.
Yeah, if we want to get down to the community level, so one thing that we'll do with folks like Elaine, who's on this call for Washington County, but develop materials to help your broadband committees to communicate to your townspeople why it is you went with this technology, or why you went with this type of business model, and to build political support, political will within the town to do something that may not be the easiest thing, but is the right decision based on your broadband committee. So we will be supporting some places that where there may be but where there might be opposition within the town to the project that your committee has come up with. If you have that kind of concern, reach out to us and we might be able to help with some strategies, with some materials on outreach to folks, letter writing campaigns, op-ed campaigns, pre-subscription lists, so that you can show, look, we have hundreds of people who are waiting for this service to get turned on. Don't take it away from them. Those are strong messages that you can use to keep momentum on your side when it can be pretty tough, because it might take a year and a half before your service gets turned on from the time that you make your decision about what you're going to do. So it's important to communicate a lot. It's important to keep people on your side. And those are things that we may be able to help you with. And over time, folks like Sunrise County Economic Council, is that the right last C, Elaine? Will help as well.
And Elaine has been a very valuable ally in all of this as we you know, double
And Joe
down.
and Elaine talk more than me and Joe talk, so. If you're talking to Elaine, you're talking to Joe, and they're almost a hive mind at this point.
Thank you.
Good to hear from you again, Ken. And thank you for your question, Jeannie. But yes, on the local level, yeah, we can also do things to help. But on the statewide level and the federal level, we're trying our best to keep Maine on the good path that it's been on.
How are we feeling? Maxed out? Are we all maxed out on broadband right now? Cool.
Good.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. This will be viewable on YouTube, probably on the Maine Broadband Coalition website as well. If you're, looking to go back and maybe find out something that we talked about, whatever you may be, if you want to send it to your community members as well, it's all going to be there for you, ready to view again. So thank you everybody for coming. See you soon.